Alright, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be creating our very first item. We're going to create the structure, or our item info, that's going to hold all the information related to our item. So things like the item name, icon, how much damage it does, what type of item it is. We're going to create all of that, and we're going to add our very first item. Let's go ahead and get started here. The first thing that we want to do is come into our content folder, and in our main we're going to create some new folders. So right click and add a new folder, and we want to name this blueprints. So we're going to use the blueprints for all the different blueprints that we create, and in here we want to create a new folder and name this enums. Now what we want to do is go ahead and open that up and right click, and under the create advanced asset here we have blueprints. At the very bottom we have this enumeration. So you can see in that little tooltip, that white tooltip right down there, it says an enumeration is a list of named values. So if you remember when we were talking about variables, basically an enumeration is just a options menu. So if we create an enumeration here, we're going to go ahead and give this a name. We're going to name this e_item type, and double click to open that up. Now, one thing I want to discuss real quickly is every time we open up a window, it opens up like this rather than being docked in our main editor here. So I want to change that because it's kind of annoying having to dock every single window up here. So if we go into edit, editor preferences, down here under the asset editor open location, we can change this to main window. So every time we open something up, it will just open up in this main window. Okay. So in our item type, basically an enumeration is a user defined setting or option. So what we can do is add enumerator here at the top. So we can add 5 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so these enumerators, we can change this display name here to resource, because this is an item type. So we're going to have the different types of items here. So we have a resource, we have a equipable, and we have an armor item type, and then we have a consumable, and then we have a buildable. So basically these are just user defined by us. And now what we can do is we can use this enum to select what type of item this is. So if you haven't messed around with enumerations, in our character here in the variables we can add this enumeration that we just created. So if you add a plus for the variable test enum, we can just name it that real quick and change this boolean to our e_item type enum. So it'll be this little green one right here. So if we compile and save this, in our default value, you're going to see we have this drop down menu now. So we have a resource, an equipable, armor, consumable. So that's all that an enum is, right? It allows us to create these custom options, and then we can use it to select the different types of options. Okay. So I'm going to delete this. We don't actually need that inside of our character. But we're just creating all the enums that we're going to use for our item info. So we created our item type. The next thing that we want to create is our item rarity enumeration. So right click, add a blueprint enumeration. This will be named e_item rarity. And double click to open that up. Going to add 5 different enumerators, and for our different item rarities, you can come up with whatever different names that you want, but we have common, so you have like a common item, then you have uncommon, rare item, epic, and then a legendary. So these are different item rarities. So you'll have a common item, uncommon, then it goes up to rare, epic, and then legendary. So, you know, you can use different names if you wanted to, but for now this will do. So this enum will control how rare an item is, depending on what we set it to. The next thing, or the last enumeration that we want to create, is go to Blueprints, Enumeration, and we're going to name this E_armor type. So we open this up. This will be the different armor types that we have, or, you know, the different, basically the different clothing slots that our character has. So we're going to add 4 of these, and the first one's going to be named Helmet. The next one is going to be named Chest, and the third one will be Pants, and the last one will be Boots. Now again, you could have more of these, but we're going to just stick to 4 because the way that this character is designed is the character comes with a t-shirt, different modular clothing pieces, so he has like pants, boots, a shirt, and all that stuff. And so that's why we have it set up like this. You know, alternatively, you could add more different, you know, you could have like gauntlets, you could have like a belt, or more different armor types. It just depends on what type of character model you're using, if you have all the different assets to go with it. So this will do for now. So we've created all these different enumerations, which are basically, you know, user-generated options for us. Now we're going to create the actual item, the item data, or the item info. And so in our Blueprints folder, we're going to create a new folder, and this will be named Structures. Now in our Structures folder, we're going to right-click, and under the Blueprints, we have, under the enumeration, a structure. So if I click on Structure here, I'm going to name this to S_item info. Now if we open this up, all that a structure is basically a group of variables. So right now you see we have a boolean here. We can add another variable and we can change this, you know, to a string. And so this can be just a random group of variables. And basically a structure is like a variable that we can add inside of our character. And so for this particular structure, we want to create all the variables that will define our item. So the very first one that we want to create here, the very first variable that we want is an integer. And the name is going to be a item ID. So we're going to use item IDs for all our different items. Then click Add New Variable. And this will be another integer. We're going to name this to item quantity. So how many items do you have in this stack? We'll add another variable, and instead of an integer, this is going to be a texture 2D. So down here, we want this texture 2D, okay? And object reference. And so this will be our item icon. So this will be like the icon of the item. So it'll be like a little picture of our hatchet, or, you know, whatever type of resource like wood or stone. Add another variable here. We're going to change this to a text, and we're going to name this to our item name. So we're going to have a text to store our item name. Add another variable here. It'll be text as well, and we'll have an item description, or DSC for short for description. In this variable, you could add, you know, a description of what the item does, so that the player knows what the item is used for. Add another variable. We're going to change this to an integer, and we're going to name this to item damage. So how much damage does the item do? Depending on the item type, we may or may not use this. So for example, for a weapon, we're going to use the damage, but for like a consumable, we're not going to use the damage. So we'll add another variable here, and this will be our enumeration that we created. So type in E_item rarity. So we want this E_item rarity enumeration that we created. And we'll name this to item rarity. So we'll define how rare this particular item is. Add another variable here and change the type to integer. And for the name, we'll change this to item cur HP. So item CUR HP. So this is our item's current health. And we want to add another variable and leave it as integer and name this to item max HP. Okay, so we're going to use this variable to store the current HP of an item. So for example, if you have a hatchet, you're going to start out with 100 HP. Every time you swing the hatchet and it hits something, it's going to subtract 1 from that HP. That way they have durability and items aren't indestructible. Let's add another variable here. This will be of the type Boolean. And we're going to name this to is stackable ? So this will determine whether or not this item can be stacked or if it can't be stacked. So, you know, for resources, you'd have like 100 wood per stack, and then you'd have weapons which aren't stackable. Add another variable here. We're going to change this to an integer, and we'll name this to stack size. So you can determine how much this item stacks by. And I think throughout this course, we're just going to use 100 per stack as the stack size. Of course, you can increase it as you want. And of course, you know, for weapons, we would make the stack size like 1 and whatnot. Add another variable here, and we're going to change this to a enum that we created. So type in e_item type. So e_item type, and we'll just name this to our item type. So we'll determine what type of item this is, if this is a resource, equipable, or armor, and this will help us later on when we use the item. That way we know what to do with it. Add a new variable here. For this, we actually need to create something real quick. So real quick, in our content browser here, we want to go into our blueprints. We want to make a new folder in here and name this items. Okay, and in our items here, we want to create a new blueprint class, and we're going to choose the actor. So this is going to be our item master blueprint class that I was talking about. So we'll just name this to BP_item master. So save that file, save all. And in our s_item info, if we add a new variable here, we're going to change this to our BP_item master. And instead of using the object reference, we're going to use the class reference, because we're going to create children or child blueprint classes. So things like, you know, our weapons, pickaxe, all the different types of tools. We're going to create those classes, and whenever we set up the different items, we can set up the reference to that class so that we can spawn it in the level. So name this to item class reference, or just item class ref for short. We'll add another variable, and this will be of the type e_armor type, the last enumerator that we created, and just rename this to armor type. And then we'll add another variable here, and this will be a Boolean. We'll name this to use ammo ? So this will be for our weapons if this item uses ammo. Add a new variable here, and we'll have an integer, and name this to current ammo. Add another new variable, make sure that's integer, and name this to max ammo. So those are the different item variables that we need for a single item. So this will allow us to create a wide range of items, and it will allow us to define things like, you know, the item ID, the name of the item, description, the icon, what type of item it is, and all that sort of stuff. So we're all done with our s_item info. We can go ahead and close that. And now let's go ahead and add our very first item. So before we go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and head over to the marketplace And we're going to get some item icons that are free. So search for craft resource icons. So if you search for craft resource icons and filter by free, you're going to see we have these icons here. And so these are over 200 different item icons, and they're actually really high quality and detailed. So we're going to use all of these throughout our course. We can use things like the wood, the rocks for all the different resources. We have things like iron that we can use, berries. So you can add many different types of items. So go ahead and check this out and add a project. So add it to Survival Craft. So now that we've added it here, you're going to see 432 changes added to source control files. Would you like to import it? Just click import it. And then it might need to compile a little bit of shaders there, so we'll give it here a second. So in our craft resource icons, textures, we have all these nice high quality icons that we can use for the different items that we want. So let's go ahead and create our very first item. So in our blueprints here, we're going to create a new folder and name this to data tables. So a data table is sort of like an Excel file. If you've ever used like Microsoft Excel, it's the same sort of thing. It will allow us to create sort of an Excel file or a big long list of all the different items, all the different icons that they have, the names, descriptions, all that info. So we're going to right click and add under miscellaneous. We have here a data table. So click on that, and it's going to ask us to pick a structure. So if you remember, we created that S item info structure. So just select that and click OK. And then we'll name this to DT underscore items. So data table underscore items. So double click and open that up. And now you see we have up here on the rows, we have all the infos that we created. So item ID, quantity, icon, name, description. So up here at the top, we have this add button. So we click a plus here. And then if we move this up, this little window up here, you can see we have all the different variables now that we can set. So for our item ID, I'm going to leave this as 0. So we're going to start from 0 and go all the way up to, I think we have like 50 different items that we'll add throughout this course, but we'll start from 0, and then as we add another item, we'll set this to 1 and so on. Item quantity, you can just set this, leave this at 0. We're not going to really use it inside of here. But for our item icon, we're going to search for wood. So we're going to add a wood item. So we have this texture underscore wood underscore 10 underscore B. So we've set that there. And then for the item name, we can name this wood. In our item description, you can say a resource used for crafting various items. Item damage, it's not going to have any damage since it's a resource. Item rarity, you can leave this as common, but you can see we have that drop down where we can select, an uncommon, rare, epic, or legendary. Item current HP, since this is a resource, it's not going to have any health or anything like that. If it was like a tool or something, it'd have like 100 HP or whatnot. Is stackable, we're going to click yes, so the true, so make sure that's checkboxed. And the stack size, we'll set this to 100. So we can have 100 wood per stack. For the item type, you can select the resource. Of course, we have, our different other item types like equipable, armor, consumable, or buildable. Item class reference. So for resources, they're not going to have an item class, but if we have like weapons and tools and stuff, that will have an actual item class. Okay. So armor type, we're not going to use this at all, so you just leave it at whatever. Helmet, I think, is the default, so you don't need to mess with that. Use ammo, of course, we're not going to use ammo since it's just a resource. And current and max ammo, we can just leave that as is. So now we've added our very first item, and we're going to use this data table to add more different items as we get through this course. But basically, you can see that we've created a structure, which is more or less just a group of different variables. So you remember we have the two integers here. This is a texture 2D for the icon. We have a text here for the name, description, and then we have things like our custom enumerations that give us these little option menus. So that is it for this lecture. In our next lecture, we're going to start by creating our inventory component and inventory array. So I'll see you guys then.